you making?
I'm making an ornament for a Christmas tree, or it could be potentially a keychain. It's supposed to be a leaf, you can see. I'm trying to do some very dainty little stuff to make it look twisted, because leaves are not perfectly symmetrical.
Right.
However, the lesson with blacksmithing or smithing of any kind is that the thinner you make the metal, the faster the heat leaves. So you don't have that much time. So when they say strike while the iron's hot,
That's what that means.
it's literal, yeah. So we don't need a serious degree of fire coming up. We just need some good heat. So yeah, that's pretty good right there. This is going to be a Christmas tree ornament as well. So I've already twisted the metal, and now I'm trying to make a little bit of a finer point on this one. But yeah, the finer the object also, the less aggressive you want to strike as well. So now it's back on in there, and the way the good old days did it. Although normally I have an apprentice doing this for me.
Well, I was thinking we need to get one of those boys over here to be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get a workout into this.
Yeah.
But again, if you don't have anything that's really, really gigantic or immense in size, it's not too bad. But you can imagine if you were making a sword, if you're making an axe, you're working on equipment. Because we also have modern day welding, but back then you didn't have that. At best, you had a forge weld, and that's not a very particular easy process. In fact, the danger with forge welding is you have to get the metal at a heat where it's almost going to burn. And so you could do all that work and then it's for naught, and that's pretty demoralizing to say the least. But now I talk about it in my history classes, particularly in my U.S. History 1 class, how vital it was to have an able smith and then also a capable mason, capable cooper. You have to have all those different crafts working together. So the heat's gone. It's not hot enough for me to keep striking it, but it's still glowing hot.
Yeah.
If I put that on my skin, there'd be some serious regret.
Yes. Michael, how long have you been doing this?
Since 2017. I was getting my doctorate at Auburn University, and there's local blacksmith guilds there in Alabama. And so there was one nearby, and ironically, the forge master, as it's called, I know it sounds fictional, but that's what they're called. The forge master ended up actually being on my dissertation committee, oddly enough. I needed an outside reader, and he was in the history department, so it's just neat the different relationships you build through blacksmithing. Only 1 second degree burn so far, but I've made a variety of different things. I've made knives, I've made hooks, I've made fire pokers. In fact, this right here is a piece of metal that I've reshaped into a fire poker, which is kind of nice. I like to say I make things that are rustic, because if it looks a little rough around the edges, I'll just say it's rustic.
That's right.
So that's how it works. And there's actually a fascinating lesson with blacksmithing or smithing of any kind. The only thing you can really destroy is when you're trying to perfect it at the very end. So you can almost always fix your mistakes. You can bend it back into place, you can reshape it. But if you're trying to get it to look very, very perfect, you're going to come up short, ironically. That's when you'll ruin something. So right now we're working on these two little ornaments. This larger piece of steel right here, I'm going to use that tool called a Hardy tool that's in the anvil to cut it and make it a smaller piece. So you can't really cut this metal easily, particularly if you don't have a power saw or anything like that. So you actually have to use the heat against it. It's really interesting how it works. You know, iron, you actually don't want it, or whatever material you're using in the forge, you don't want it to be brittle. Like it's a fascinating thing. Like you want it to be hardened, right? But you don't want it to be brittle either.
Where's that point of no return between brittle and hard?
The point of no return, well, that sometimes comes into play, and you can see this is why you use the horn a little bit, because that's how you get some of your texture and some of your different. Use different parts of the anvil, of course, for different things. So the point of no return. Are you talking about the heat, or are you talking about the perfection part of it, if I may
I guess
ask?
I was thinking about the strength of the metal, the
brittleness.
brittleness.
The strength of the metal? Yeah, so the point of no return is kind of, I'm not a master smith, but it's kind of a feeling. It's where you have made it too brittle that it's not flexible enough to move.
And so you can sense it. You
can sort of sense it as well. If you also don't heat treat it properly. Now listen, I'm I'm not making any serious weapons today. Yesterday, with what little time I had, I started profiling this railroad spike to become a knife. So this is very, very rudimentary. Still a lot of work left to do. But you want to make sure that when you're heat treating it, and it's kind of an ironic thing how it works, but you want it to be both flexible and inflexible. So you might want the edge to have as sharp and as solid of an edge as possible, but you don't want the entire thing to be brittle because it'll snap. I know it's really, really popular, but that show Forged in Fire on the History Channel, you'll see blades snap, and that's because they haven't been heat treated right. One of the things I had just learned recently, believe it or not, was that when you are particularly heat treating a blade, you want it to make sure you take into account the poles. So you actually want to have it north-south as you're cooling it down. You can use water to temper it, and that of course hardens it. But actually back here we have, I believe, some form of motor oil that I found. There's always stuff in the shop I'm never expecting to find. Then again, I've only been here a couple days. But that oil you can use to quench it as well. Now, when all's said and done, we'll see if it works on the screen. When all's said and done, the blade is supposed to look like this. When all's said and done.
Nice.
Right? So the goal is you put a twist in it. Again, you put it in the vise, and that's how you'll be able to make that happen. But we'll see. It's all about getting enough heat. So if I don't get enough heat today, I probably won't go and be able to do that. But it's a fun little process, that's for sure.
You just started with a raw railroad spike.
A raw railroad spike, yeah. Now, again, that's not the thing you want to focus on. I believe high carbon is the proper phrase. You want to get something with high carbon, the higher quality. That's meant for durability. So it's not the kind of thing you'd want for a kitchen knife. But if you wanted to cut open and gut a fish or anything along those lines, it's not a whittling knife, but it's a knife that you can put in and set an edge to. So I enjoy that. People ask, well, have you made swords or anything like that? No, I have not. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
And at this forge in particular, it would be very difficult to make a sword because of the limited space. So the actual area, the pocket where you have the heat and the coal being formed and supported is relatively minimal. It's only about 6 inches wide. So you'd have to be working 6 inches of time at a sword. And you have to get it incredibly hot in order to be able to move that steel. But at my other forge, I didn't really have a chance to do it either because I'd be sharing it with a bunch of other people. And so if anybody shows up with something longer than like 10 inches or so, people start rolling their eyes going, oh no, we got to share with King Arthur here. No one really wants to do that. But it's a fun thing, although I will say the process is really challenging, but it's nice to try to do it the traditional older way. There's no power hammers. In fact, if we have a power hammer, this is the power hammer, right? So you have someone working with you, and they're the one that wields a sledgehammer, and you hold it. But it is fun to try to do it the old way. That's why I'm not ashamed enough to admit, I've burned probably at least 3 different tomahawks and failed with 3 different tomahawks just because I couldn't forge it. Just because they wouldn't weld together. My wife rolls her eyes because she says it's very bad for the environment, and I say I know. But borax is actually what you use to try to forge weld things.
Really?
Yeah, it's not good for the environment, of course, but it's what you actually use, and so you have to get it incredibly hot. So this is pretty hot right here, but you have to get it incredibly hot to the point of almost burning. I'm gonna see if I can get this a little bit straighter. To the point of almost burning. And then you have to put the borax in it, liberally apply it, and then you put it back in the forge. Then you have to kind of wait until it almost burns again. You don't want it to burn, but it almost burns, and then you have to try to hit it as hard as you can and force it to weld together. But as we know, there's nothing that's perfect in nature, so the iron might not be perfect, the heat might not be enough, the coal might not be enough, and you'll find yourself with a rather unfortunate byproduct, which is a failed project. But I mean, it's all good. I mean, you just learn and just move on. Although you might get picked on by your fellow blacksmiths who are saying, "Come on, dude, come on, man." But I'm like, you try it.
Are you in a forge association? Or?
I was in a blacksmith guild in Alabama. Yeah, it sounds kind of old-fashioned, but you know, the guild was in medieval times the process by which a particular group of craftsmen would make sure that their work was up to tier and of quality.
They were each other's critics, weren't they?
They were each other's critics, and also, let's just be honest about human nature. They may have tried to run people out of town that they thought were having less quality work or less prices per object. So, but no, I really do enjoy this. You know, my area of expertise is 19th century America, and it's so fascinating because you've got a century where beginning of the century, you have people that are living almost akin to medieval ages and early Europe. But then by the end, you've got the modern technologies of electricity and the phone. But yet you'll still have, from the beginning of that century to the end of that century, the blacksmith.
Yes.
Which is quite fascinating. Because, you know, the quote, Wild West is still the Wild West, even into, you know, the early 1900s, so to speak. And, you know, if you're just living on a farm, maybe in New Hampshire, Vermont, you might still need to be able to do this. So,
You know, my grandfather was a blacksmith.
Was he?
On the farm, you know.
Yeah.
He had his blacksmith shop.
You needed it, particularly if you have horses.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to hire the farrier, I can afford to get a little hotter. Now that's a nice color. I like that color. You don't need much. That's almost where I want it to be. I kind of wanted to have the sides roll up on itself a little bit, like a leaf that kind of wilts. So,
Yes.
little stuff of it here and there. But I'm hopefully going to try to get. There is such a thing as literally having too many irons in the fire. I am.
All of that is beginning to make sense now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am going to try to make sure I heat this bad boy up real good so that I can actually cut the piece right there. And honestly, another thing that's just kind of, you know, you get used to it. We all have different skills and all that, but like I can pick this up without worrying it burn, because I know that if I have about a foot length and it's not really glowing hot, then I can probably pick that steel up without getting burned.
Right.
And then you learn the hard way sometimes when you're not paying attention. But this is a real cool opportunity, so I'm grateful to be here and trying to throw together what I can here.
We're very grateful.
Seeing
It's
what
been
I
a
can
while
do.
since it's been cranked up.
Yeah, no, I've had to kind of put together a contraption to get this thing working today. So, hey, as long as we have a little bit of fire, and as long as we can do things, and that's actually why when I would do blacksmithing in Alabama, I would like to do little projects. You don't need a lot of heat to heat them up. You can make it very quickly so that a child or a guest can see it very easily. But yeah, we want to get this down there. Ideally, when you're using a forge that's in really good shape, the goal is you want to kind of try to create a tunnel. So have all that heat within that tunnel. And really the only entry and exit point is going to be near where you want it to be heated up in particular. The goal is also, even though I'm not always the best at this, the goal is also to try to add from the side, not from the top, because you can suffocate it almost. So the goal is I just pulled some of this coal in, and I'm going to now try to create like really like a big heat vacuum. From this side I can see it's really, really glowing below there. See if that works. And
So does it get white when it's the hottest?
it can get white hot, yeah. Just so there's another phrase, it's white hot, absolutely. Now, white hot is where you get close to seeing it burn. I'm actually going to take that out because I'm really trying to crank this up. But yeah, white hot's another appropriate phrase for it. In fact, when you're working in a forge with a lot of different people, you're always supposed to be kind of calling out what you're doing. So they'll say hot iron when you're withdrawing it from the flame.
I guess that's a safety method, isn't it?
It's a safe, absolutely, it's a safety thing. I've only burned myself, but it's possible to get burned by other folks too. Now, I just really enjoy the practice because, you know, it was something that was practical, just like a lot of other things are practical. You know, there's a lot of skills I wish I had today that are still appropriate, that have been around for a long time.
Like
yeah,
what?
Like what? Well, woodworking.
Yeah.
Not the best woodworker, let's just put it that way. This might seem like a silly thing, but I think that the ability to know and identify your plants is a small thing, but a really important thing too. My wife's very good at that. I think those are different skills that they're still of merit and of benefit now. Now we got ourselves a good fire. I'm actually kind of stoked. I couldn't get a fire this good yesterday, so maybe my rigging today worked out a little bit. But, you know, a lot of people needed to be able to do this. A lot of people needed to be able, we're getting close, to use the Hardy tool. A lot of people needed to know how to do this. I mean, of course, it invokes imagination, but pirates needed to know how to do this.
Right.
And of course, you know, you mentioned that the school children think of pirates, their eyes get real big, but it's true because we don't think about this, but a pirate cannot just go to port. So they have to be able to do everything. If they can't steal it, they got to make it. And so you would have blacksmith forges on board ships. Of course, fire hazard, but you have to do it because you have to repair it yourself. All right, let's see if we got what we want here. Let's see. All right, that's hot enough. don't have to hit it hard. Just consistent. There we go.
There it went, yeah.
There we go. I mean, if you get it even more white hot, it's even better. But I want to take a little bit of length off that, because this round stock is what will become that object I was doing before. This little Christmas tree ornament. So
right.
that's the plan. Morning, gentlemen.